This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the Xcast. The truth is in here. I'm your host, Annie Flowers, and this is a very special episode of the Xcast because today I am joined by Kim Newton, who is a television writer and producer. Kim was a staff writer on the third season of The X-Files, writing Revelations and Quagmire. She has also written and produced for shows like Cold Case, The Blacklist, New York Undercover, Gotham, Games People Play, and many others. Welcome to the show, Kim. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking time out to chat with us today.
Absolutely.
And I'm also joined by Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, guys. You knew I had to be here for this.
Why is that, Sarah?
I kind of like Quagmire a whole lot.
Yeah.
Maybe my favorite episode.
I may have heard that about you. So, Kim, what have you been doing since COVID? Have you been watching anything interesting on TV?
Oh, I've been doing a lot of binging.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff. I love history. I love documentaries, so I've been doing a lot of that kind of stuff. I love those slow British shows. I just finished Call the Midwife.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I kind of sample a little bit of everything if I can.
Have you watched The Crown?
Yes, I finished this new season of The Crown a couple months ago. Very good. I'm always a fan of that. And of course, Jillian's in it, so that makes it a little more fun even. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow night because Handmaid's Tale is coming back.
I haven't seen it. I read the book, of course, but I haven't watched the show.
Oh, yeah, you got to watch.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so good. It's hard, but it's good.
I'm a little nervous, yeah.
Are you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's tough to get through, but
the book was hard.
The acting is the book is a little more sort of tedious to read. This is a little easier, I think, in watching.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the acting is so great that you just kind of have to do it. Obviously Elizabeth Moss is amazing, but Ann Dowd is fantastic. She you can just watch the paint dry with her. She's just so good.
I liked the sequel too, the book.
Oh yeah, I read that. Yeah,
I haven't read that.
That was good.
Really, and in the audiobook they did. They had 3 different narrators.
Right.
So I'm really curious to see how the show leads into the book.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, I really like how they set that up. It's a cool.
TV has changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
much.
That just TV is now the movies. I mean, it's just evolved, and the subject matter is more focused and yet more broad.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, Sarah and I were talking a little bit about that before you joined us today. And Sarah, what was your question about that? Like, how has the writer's room changed since the 90s when you had these longer seasons and each episode was like its own story, and now it's more one season is like a long movie. How has it changed in the writer's room?
Well, writers' rooms are fundamentally the same, I think, but they're different in that now if you're not doing a network show, you go into a writer's room and you have a 24-week commitment, and however much you can get done in 24 weeks. And then it's a decision to bring maybe a small group back. But for all of these cable and streaming shows, when it's not that big, huge order, it's over a tighter period of time, way before production begins. So that's changed a little bit. But otherwise, it's not really that different. There's just a lot more of them now because back, when I did the X-Files, it was,
right.
There was really just the major networks, and even Fox was not officially a network. They still considered themselves sort of more of a news outlet.
Even with Like The Simpsons and Married with Children?
Yeah, but it's certainly in the drama department, in their primetime block, they sort of skated by as being able to pay more of a basic cable fee than a network fee because
okay.
they didn't have as many hours of primetime shows because they had more news later at night.
Gotcha. I wouldn't have even thought about that. That makes sense.
Yeah, so there was just a lot fewer opportunities to do anything beyond, ABC, NBC, CBS, maybe the WB and Fox.
And now you have all these streaming services at your disposal.
Yeah, you can't even, I've been trying to sell projects and have meetings and stuff. And it's just coming up with a list of potential places to go. People are bringing up places where it's oh, I didn't know that was a service now. Yep, that's a service now.
So how did you get started? Well, before we get to the X-Files, I do have a question. How did you get started in television? And was it something you always wanted to do?
Good question. No, I was probably a bit unfocused. And I think looking back, I sort of had always had a vivid imagination and had journals and wrote little short stories as a little kid. I showed my now teenage son some stories I wrote, as a kid, these ongoing stories. And
I can't believe you saved them.
Somehow, my mom probably did, and I ended up with a box of them because she was good that way. So I always did that kind of thing, and I was going to school at Texas State University outside of Austin, and ended up studying journalism and advertising more specifically. And that was fun. And I out of college, I worked in Dallas at a big ad agency, and I think that was, not realizing it at the time, kind of a stepping stone because, when you're brand new, letting anybody sort of judge your work or judge your creativity, even if it's a little slug line for an ad or a little radio spot or something, that's already starting to happen. So you sort of start to build a tougher skin and get comments and constructive criticism. And that is, I think one of the toughest things to learn when you're new in the writing field, probably any writing field. But I did that for a few years. It wasn't 30 something like I hoped it would be. You guys are too young. But the show 30 something was really big in the 90s. And advertising was a big part of the show, an ad agency. So I think a lot of people had switched their majors to advertising at the time. But anyway, so I did that for 3 or 4 years. And my brother was a doctor out here on the west side of Los Angeles. And I was talking to him, when I say doctor, think Hawkeye Pierce, don't think Frank Burns. So he's a pretty adventurous guy. And I was talking to him on the phone, and I was like, I don't really like Dallas that much. And I heard a bunch of older women at the company talking about being vested in the 401k. And I don't know what that is, but it made me really sad. And he was like, why don't you come out here and write movies or TV? Something like that. And I was like, I'm sure that's everybody wants to come to LA to act or direct or write something. I've never even seen a script. So he goes, well, I have all these Hollywood patients and all of that. He goes, let me talk. I have somebody in my mind. So this older gentleman called me up, and he was a retired comedy writer, and he was teaching extension courses at UCLA. And he sent me scripts and things like that, and said, if you come out here, you get a part-time job, and you can take extension courses in, comedy, drama, film, whatever interests you. And I initially did want to write comedy, so I quit my job. My brother was like, listen, in your 30s and 40s, you're too bogged down. You can't make changes. In your 20s, that's when you throw caution to the winds, and make some bold moves, because you can afford it. You can afford to make mistakes or make big changes. So
right, yeah.
I came out and I stayed with him, and I worked at Big Five, and I walked dogs, And I took courses, and eventually I thought, I'd like to get some kind of a job on the studio lot. I always sort of pragmatist. I was like, if the writing thing doesn't work out, there's all these other Hollywood jobs. I don't know what they are. What's a gaffer? I don't know what that is. So I ended up getting a job on David Kelly's first show, Picket Fences.
Oh,
and so I went.
I loved Picket Fences.
Yeah, it was a great show, and I got one of the 2 PA jobs, and I was at this point I was a little old for a PA. I went from having my name on a door in Dallas to making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for David Kelly and filling up his car with gas. But anyway, so I stayed there, and I got bumped up to writer's assistant, and then the next year I was a writer's assistant and a researcher. And Ann Donahue was my writing mentor. She was my sort of direct boss. She's of CSI fame. She co-created all those shows. And I was doing a little research for David for Chicago Hope, and for something really specific, and I sort of tripped over. Back then, you went to the library. But anyway, I tripped over an interesting article about some medical procedures. And I thought, well, my brother's a doctor, and these are really interesting, and I don't know how well I'll write it, but I'm going to give it a shot. And so I wrote a spec for Chicago Hope, and they ended up buying it and making it, and they put it with some other stories too. But that was sort of my first credit, and that script got me an agent. So that was sort of my start. Pretty timely and pretty lucky, I guess.
That is amazing. From Dallas to LA.
Yeah.
That's great. And so brave, because a lot of people come out here with that specific intention. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to do this. And you were just like, okay, I'll give it a try. And it's not what you had really trained for. People study it for years.
Not what I trained for.
Do you feel...
And I thought, I'm going to give it a few years, and then I can go back to advertising, and I can do that in LA.
Right.
So everything happened kind of in my time frame window. It's frankly the only thing that I've ever planned out and given an end date that actually happened.
Wow.
Do you feel like having a marketing and advertising expertise helped you kind of market yourself a little bit too, and have that confidence and know kind of how to sell yourself? Because I feel like as a writer, that's kind of important these days, at least, or maybe back then too.
So maybe I don't know about now, but in those early days, even to get that first PA job, which there's a lot of competition for things like that, I came up with a little scheme, and I sent some clever thing to the office, and I ended up getting it. So it may have played a little bit of part in those early days without me even realizing that's what it was.
Yeah.
Very nice. And then from there, how did you get the staff job on the X-Files?
Well, I had, like I said, that Chicago Hope had gotten me a script and an agent. And so that was really the first time I was sort of able to go out on meetings and things. And I needed a second sample. I wrote a New York, an NYPD Blue spec that got me a meeting with David Milch, and eventually got me a freelance script, which was nice. But anyway, so I'd written those 2 scripts, and those were my samples. And, I got a lot of meetings. Staff writers haven't met anybody yet. So, I was all over town meeting people, and I got a few offers, and one of them was the X-Files. And I didn't want to take it, because I had gotten an offer on Chicago Hope, and I sort of had grown up in that camp, and that was going to be sort of the more comfortable move. And I hadn't really watched the X-Files, and the X-Files was already sort of this, little secret pleasure of a lot of people, sort of a, rising little star. And everybody was like, you got to do it. And I had a meeting with Chris, and I thought, I'm just gonna tank this meeting, and then I can do the thing I want, and nobody will pressure me. So, and I went in there, you know, and their offices were right next to picket fences. So it was the same lot and very close by. And he's like, yeah, I've seen you like riding around in a cart with lunches in your back.
Oh, wow.
And so anyway, you know, I basically, I can't remember exactly how it all went. He was very nice. And I had said that I really wasn't a sci-fi person, and that my middle brother and I used to sort of, you know, have little fist fights and pushing matches after school because he wanted to watch Star Trek and I wanted to watch something else. And he was like, well, this isn't sci-fi. And I, you know, so, you know, he liked my writing, and I just took everybody's advice, and I just like bit the bullet and, you know, did the more uncomfortable thing for me, which, you know, was just a different kind of writing than I had imagined for myself.
So then was it a lot of playing catch up when you got that job? You're like, okay, I have to watch all the X-Files episodes now. I have to get a sense for the characters.
You have to know them. So, well, you know, I was there for the third season, so I didn't have that much to watch. You know,
22 episodes per season, though. I mean, that's still quite a bit.
But, you know, I've had to watch, you know, 5 seasons, 22 episodes, you know, for other things. So, even jobs I didn't get, you know. So I watched them all, and, you know, certain ones really stuck out to me, and I was happy to see that there was humor in the show. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I did have an appreciation for it. You know, it was a very well crafted kind of thing, and it was just like figuring out like what could be my take, and what would I come up with as like maybe as the only woman on the show, and that kind of thing. So that you know, once you get there, that becomes the big challenge, is throwing an idea at Chris that he is going to like.
Distinguishing yourself in some way.
Yeah. And coming up with something that's very different than what they've already done. And, you know, and just appealing to him on, you know, that simple level of, you know, why it would be a good X-Files. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit more. One of our fans, Andrew, asks, what inspired you to write both of the episodes, Revelations and Quagmire, and did they turn out different from your original script? How so? Well, Revelations was my first script, and so that was sort of the most anxiety-ridden scenario. And I had pitched a couple of things that he was excited about. You know, when you give him ideas, you know, he doesn't necessarily want to hear the whole plot of what your idea is. He wants to hear, I'm sure you've heard this from other writers, he wants to hear what your 3 boo scenes are. Have you heard that? So no. The boo scenes are not necessarily scary scenes, but they're your water cooler scenes, you know. And so I had pitched him something in that first week about, you know, how little girls play light as a feather, stiff as a board at slumber parties. Uh-huh. That old game that everybody, you know, did at sleepovers back in like the 70s and stuff. And he thought that was really cool. And then I couldn't break it. And then I went and I was like, do you mind? Can I change my story? And he was like, yeah, of course. You know, what else do you want to do? And he goes, you know, I got a couple of things here. You know, I wanted to do something with like coyotes in Mexico and the border. And so I was like, well, okay, let me go think about that. And then I spent a bunch of time and I couldn't come up with anything. I just couldn't. And I was like, I'm failing already. And so I didn't want to go in there and say that I couldn't do it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go in there and just say I have a better idea. So I started thinking, and I was like, well, there hasn't really been a Scully episode, like really focused on her. And we don't know anything about her at this point. In the series, except that she wears that little cross. That's all we really know about her. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to do something that tests her religion, you know. So it ended up being stigmata. And you know, he really liked that idea, and so I had pitched him the idea that she's in a confessional. You know, we see her through the little holes in the confessional, and you know, these were my boo scenes. He really liked that, and
and what else? Oh, the sort of bilocation where the kid is in sort of seemingly two different places. And I think I pitched him the teaser where Laramie, is like this false preacher who has the bleeding palms, and that Mulder leans down and touches the blood and licks it and says too much sugar. So those were my three initial scenes those are my three initial scenes that I had pitched to him, that I had just sort of seen on a quick sort of a quick kind of way to get his attention, and he liked that, and so the episode was built. And that one, that he liked the script, and I know it was a long time ago. It's hard to remember everything, but it was very much the way I had conceived it. I had gone, and then it was fun. I had gone to a recycling plant to see how that all worked, because there's that whole recycling symbol and that whole follow through thing. And Darren Morgan went with me, and we had a little field trip, and we drove out to some place out in the boondocks and checked it out, see what it was like, just so I could write it more accurately. But yeah, that one turned out pretty close, and I think everybody was happy that it was sort of some new territory where we were learning a little bit more about her, and that and yet they could both be at odds and be torn, and it worked out nicely.
And what about Quagmire?
Quagmire was, that was like towards the end of the season, and I liked that one. I came up with that idea a little more quickly. I've always sort of liked the whole Loch Ness Monster, stories, and I thought that was a sort of an interesting monster kind of tale that could be fun. And I grew up in a fishing family, so I thought, okay, I'll do a lake and I'll do a bait shop and all that kind of stuff. So the basic idea of that came pretty quickly, and Darren was like, we should use those guys from my other episodes, the stoner and the dude and the whoever, and I was like, oh yeah, that would be fun. And the one thing that I did, that people think I chose to do, but I was happy to do it, but I was asked to do it also, was Darren's episode where Scully ends up having Queequeg, the dog. Everybody loved that. And Chris was like, it's great, it's awesome, but we can't see Scully at home feeding the dog, and that can't be an ongoing thing. We got to get rid of the dog. So we got to do it in the next few episodes. And I thought, she could put it on a leash and it could run in the bushes, and then the leash could roll back with nothing in it. So it just sort of worked out nicely.
So that was you.
That was me.
It could have been someone else, but you chose to do it.
Oh my goodness.
It worked well, though. I mean, it made sense. It made sense.
Yeah. The dog had to go. It just had to go.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. She can't be running all over the world for weeks on end, and the dog's at home.
Especially when they can't find any boarding. And
and you don't want to spend time talking. You don't want to spend time talking about that either.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So that episode was not as smooth as the first one, because it was later in the season. Turnaround times are shorter, production and prep happen faster because it's just an eating machine, and it gets really tight towards the end. And Chris thought it had stuff he liked, but there were some other ideas, and including the idea about the stoner guy and all of that, and I had already, everybody talks about the act where Mulder and Scully are on the rock, and I had always had that where they're close to shore and we just don't realize it, in the moment. So because we were in a crunch, and Darren and I were, he was probably the person I was closest to, and on the show, and so we started to divvy up a few things, and I think, I took notes from Chris and from Howard Gordon, and Howard took a pass at an act, and I took I think 2 acts, and Darren was like, "Can I just do I got these ideas about Moby Dick and on the Rock." And, he's a genius. You're not going to say, no, don't do it. So I was like, yes, go. So he did end up writing the scenes with the stoner guys licking the frogs, mm-hmm. and infusing that act on the Rock with his Moby Dick analogies. So, it sort of got pieced together and smoothed out, and off it went.
It all blends together so well, though.
It does.
It's seamless. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So, that was a good episode. I think the only thing that sort of disappointed me in it production-wise was the alligator. The alligator looked like a big rubber alligator.
Okay.
And I was like, damn. Because most, the rest of it was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't, that was a little disappointing, but
it's never bothered me, Sarah.
Really?
No. At least it's dark and it's so scary and it's so fast and you're just it's such an intense scene and everybody's just like, oh no. And it's a great plot twist. You're just so excited about the plot twist of it being an alligator. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't really focused on that, but I can understand.
Yeah. It just was, just visually, I thought the weakest thing. And I'm a big animal fan, so I loved the whole, the frog depletion and that kind of stuff was fun. And then most of the characters were people I knew, so I had fun with the names, and it was a good time. It was a very good time.
Yeah,
I'm sure the crew wasn't happy because it shot in the winter, out at some lake in Canada. I'm sure they weren't happy about that, but
nice and cold.
Yep.
Yeah. I want to hear about some of the names, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I've always wondered about the Patricia Ray. I know that's after somebody because you wouldn't
know about the Patricia Ray. Patricia Ray is my mom's name, and if you go on IMDb, there's trivia, and it says that it's Kim Manner's mother's name, and I can't get them to change it. And my mom is no longer with us, so it's it really bugs me.
I think we're gonna have to get on that.
Yeah, help me.
Xcast will make it happen.
Help me. I think I even sent a picture of my birth certificate with my mom's name on it. I mean, it's a weird thing to focus on, but I just thought
it's important.
Yeah. Well,
what's your mom?
Well, she was around. She was around when I did it, so she was flattered, of course.
I bet she was so proud.
Yeah, I think so. And we fished and boated a lot, so it just made sense to name it after my mom. And then, a lot of people from high school, I kind of go to that well a fair amount from either my early childhood or high school. I pick a lot of the names from. So yeah, lots of, I can't remember. You'll have to ask me about other names because I can't remember them off the top of my head.
I know Ansel, was that after the photographer?
Yeah, Ansel, and I think there was a Milliken something, which was our casting director.
Faraday.
Yeah, Faraday was a boy that I met in Mexico in high school that I had a crush on.
Nice. And
his name was Brett Faraday or something, and I just thought it was a neat name. But there was Richard Bailey was somebody I went to high school with, and Sheriff Lance Hint was somebody I went to high school with. And it's fun because, they're all back in Texas. So, you see them at reunions and they're like, hey, thanks for naming somebody after me. It's just fun.
So flattering,
yeah.
So you grew up in Texas. How did you decide on the Blue Ridge Mountains?
Well, I was trying to pick something that, because I knew they would be shooting it in Canada. So I wanted something, that you would believe. And so it just sort of made sense. And also, I tend to lean towards Southern things more than other places because I just thought it would be fun to do the South. And And, you wouldn't have Show Me Your Bobbers in New England. That's a Southern thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I live just down the road from the Blue Ridge Mountains.
You do?
It's very exciting. So, yeah.
Oh, where do you
I'm
live?
in North Georgia.
Where?
I'm in Buford, Georgia, so it's kind of between Gainesville and Athens.
Okay.
Yeah, so not too far. And we go up. I'm from Knoxville, so we go up through like Dahlonega and up through the Smokies, and that's where I grew up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Extra special meaning for Sarah.
Good.
Yes. I was so excited to see, Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yeah.
It's close. It's close.
Yeah, and I remember there was some speculation that, like, Big Blue had something to do with IBM, and it's like, no, I didn't. No, it didn't.
Yeah, Big Blue is my AOL screen name. Big Blue 82.
Is it?
It was, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Forever.
That's great. That's great.
Now, you briefly mentioned, or not briefly, you have talked about working with Darren Morgan. Can you tell us a little bit more what it was like to collaborate with him?
I think, just in general, it was a pretty big staff, and it was all guys, and I liked them all, but he was right across the hall from me, and we just kind of had a bond because, there's really nobody like Darren Morgan, and it was my first job, and, it was very competitive there. Some places are very teamy and other places are more competitive, and I, as I told you in the beginning, I already sort of felt out of my element because this wasn't really the kind of thing I thought I would be writing or really understood as well. And so, I had some anxieties, and so, we just spent a lot of time together, and he would be like, he was a very anxiety ridden guy just because he's such a perfectionist as a writer. And so he'd sort of be pulling his hair out, and he decided that he worked better if I was on his couch. So he would invite me in to take naps on his couch while he worked.
Wait, I'm sorry. So he didn't want to collaborate with you per se. He asked you to.
Well, this was just sort of part of our relationship.
That's so funny.
So, and then, he really like didn't know how to type. He really he just sort of hunted and pecked, and when he was writing the cockroach episode, he was in a big panic about finishing in time, and I said, well, let me come to your house this weekend, and I will, while you keep writing, because he wrote on a legal pad. David Kelly did that too. But when I was a writer's assistant, I had to interpret David's writing, and that was not easy. So I was like, if I can figure out his writing, I can figure out yours. So I went over, and I had in Topanga Canyon sitting on the floor typing his pages. It was an adventure. So I think we sort of always helped each other out in a certain kind of way. Just through our sort of friendly bond.
That's wonderful.
But as far as like collaborating on Quagmire, I was just like, I just wanted him to do his thing because he's so brilliant. He certainly was not gonna do something horrible because he's incapable. So I was just sort of excited to see what he was gonna do, and I knew a fair amount about Moby Dick, but he clearly knew a lot more than I did. So I was just excited to see what he was gonna come up with, and obviously it was very impressive because people still talk about it. That whole act.
It's legendary, that scene.
It is, yeah.
It is.
It is.
There's t-shirts about it.
Are there?
Yeah.
I've never seen one.
Yep. They call it the Conversation on the Rock, so I think some people just have COTR on their shirt.
You're kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you guys should send me one.
I think didn't Jillian wear it one time, or was that something else?
It might have been Jillian, yeah.
Really? I'll have to look for that.
So. We'll have to look.
We'll find you a shirt.
I'll have to find one.
I'll make you a shirt.
I do have one bit of, when the season was over, I do have one little thing from that episode that they sent me from production, and that is in the store. If you remember, in the little fish store, in the bait store, there was a framed shadow box of a scale from Big Blue, and I do have that.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's amazing. I would love to have one of the mugs that was in the case. That's like my life goal. But We had X Fest not too long ago outside of Chicago, and Jim, the guy that runs the X-Files Preservation Society, he's gone around collecting a bunch of memorabilia and items, and Chris just sent him a whole load, like truckloads of stuff from the show, and he brought the Bobber's hat, and it was in the case, and I just lost my mind over the Bobber's hat, and he was like, do you want to wear it? And I was like, I really want to wear the hat. So I got to wear the hat. I've got a picture of me wearing the Bobber's hat.
Oh, really?
It was, yeah.
So he's not selling it, he's just showing it off.
No, yeah.
Okay.
It's just, he's starting a museum of all
Upstate New York, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He's collecting, and he's collecting a bunch of the items
Okay.
in the show.
Within driving distance
yeah.
from my house, I believe. So
Excited.
Really?
One day.
In it. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. He's got some really cool stuff, and Chris just sent him, he's got like the dead alien bodies and all kinds of really cool stuff. It's amazing.
Wow.
It's really something.
That's very cool. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I got a box. I do have a box of stuff. If he reaches out to me, I'll go through it.
Now, you've spoken a little bit about it. Can you tell us a little bit what it was like? Michael asks, what was it like working with Chris Carter?
Chris is, his love for that show was like so intense, I mean, he just lived and breathed it in every way. And through that passion, it sort of created sort of the first online following. It was the first show where you could go online afterwards and see what people thought. I mean, that had never happened before. So, he really he really knew what he was doing there. And, he like every showrunner, they all have sort of their little quirks and their priorities and their ways of doing things. When he would get excited, he was really excited, down to his boots. And if he was not happy, you didn't miss it. So, it's when you're in charge, that's pretty much the way, frankly, I guess it ought to be. But, all of the writing staff was in a different building. So you would sort of march down there, and you'd have your little board with your little cards. And, you probably heard this. Your cards had to be perfect. Have you heard anything about how when you presented an episode?
Okay. Tell us.
So you had a little portable bulletin board and index cards, and those were going to be the beats that you were going to pitch out to him in his office. And so you had to sort of carry it across the Fox lot, and on a windy day, you're trying to protect it and get down there, but your cards also had to be perfect, meaning your writing had to be, most people did it with a ruler, like every letter, like they used a ruler and to make sure that it was even and everything was straight, because if your cards were messy, he might send you back and say, bring it back when your cards look good. And if you wrote too many words, he didn't like that. If he thought your card was crowded. So, what you would end up doing is coming up with kind of like what maybe this is like an advertising thing. Like you'd come up with just like something really poppy for the card, like kabam, whatever, I'm trying to think of any, I do have all my cards actually. You try to come up with some like little shorthand thing that you would remember what you wanted to say, which was much longer than what the card would be. So that was a very particular thing to Chris. And then later on, the Mayhew sisters, who came the year after me, who I know well and have worked with on other shows, they had figured out how to print them on a computer and print them out on cards, which I think changed the whole thing. But you would spend an amazing amount of time working on your cards just to present them. So that was always kind of fun. And, I often go back to some of the things that I learned from him, like if I'm in another writer's room and we're just having trouble breaking a story or something like that, I'll eventually sort of revert back to, okay, so let's just think of like these 3 water cooler scenes, and because nothing here is interesting, and let's work backwards from that, because we would design a story around those boo scenes, and not to say that if you come up with something better and you'd change a boo scene or whatever, but I would go back to some of that stuff that I learned in that camp. So, but he was a good guy. He was a good guy, but very passionate and emotional about his. It was his show. It was his baby.
Of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it seems like such an intense setting that I'm sure it's a huge learning opportunity and such a great jumping off point for anyone who is looking to succeed in television writing or anything really. Right.
Well, it was certainly a very tough first job, and in a weird way, sometimes you learn the most from that.
I bet, yeah.
From things that are more difficult, and then you appreciate it when everything's sort of smooth and and it's not as competitive internally or something. They're all different. I've done many shows now, and they all have sort of a different patina to them.
Sure. How would you say that, any of the other shows that you've worked on, Gotham or anything else, kind of compared to writing for the X-Files?
One of the things that I really liked about the X-Files process was, we didn't have a writer's room. If you needed some, heads in the room to bounce something around, you'd literally say, "Hey, Frank, hey, Vince, will you come in here and look at this, and what do you think? And something's wrong here." And, they would spitball with you, but there wasn't an official room that you sat in all day. So, you really had this sort of ownership of what you were working on. And yet it might change when you pitched it or when you turned in an outline or whatever that may be. But, even as a staff writer, you're really included in the process, and you were doing what everybody else was doing, regardless of their level. So that was actually really nice, because in a writer's room, especially a big writer's room, which I think can be sort of counterproductive, people check out a little bit if it's not their episode. It's just, or it's just like every beat of the story is going to be broken in that room, and none of it really is yours. You just have to be the one to put it together. It just feels different. And Chris, he was a tough guy, but, he wanted everyone to feel like they were a filmmaker. And so, you were invited to go sit in editing, and, most shows won't let anyone in editing, even at a high level. That starts to sort of go away, where, just the director and maybe the showrunner want to do that. Or you just give a round of notes and that's it, and you're not really involved. But, he wanted you to feel that ownership. And so that was really nice. So I think because the episodes were very standalone, you could do that. Other shows like Gotham had, you had a lot of those were sort of ended up being sort of 2-parters, or there was an arc that was going through. And so that ended up sort of being a big writer's room. All the beats were sort of put up on the board, and that was sort of decided by the group. So you didn't get to go off and then come in and put it all up on the board and then discuss it. It just would happen that way. It's just a different way to do it. But you don't have that ownership and that sort of pride of having come up with, your take or your version of it. Then it just becomes sort of the room competition of, some people talk more than other people. Not everybody's a room person, but they might be great writers, So,
yeah.
So it really can be tricky, but I do enjoy a room, but I also think in the perfect scenario, it should be a little bit more of a hybrid of having a lot of time to go do your research, to put together what you think it ought to be and be able to put that on the board and then talk about it in the room. So, it all ends up sort of being different. But yeah, you didn't really have that sense of ownership on a show like Gotham.
Interesting. I didn't realize all that. It was more like very collaborative
in
the room.
Right. Right. So, and that is more common, that is more common because most things aren't truly standalone episodes anymore, unless you're talking about like a Black Mirror or something like that.
Now, you mentioned the light as a feather, stiff as a board, and Adam asks if there were any episode ideas, let's say besides that one, that you didn't get to do.
No, because it was it was so hard to come up with an idea that fit, all the categories that you needed to fit. Chris needed to like it. Nothing like it could have been done before. So, it was, and I'm just one of those people, every idea is my last. Some people are like, oh, I just am brimming with ideas. Every idea I have, I'm like, I'll never have another idea.
Oh, no.
So
I can identify with that.
Yeah.
After all these years of writing.
I know. It's just ingrained in me that I'll never have another idea. And then when I have ideas, when I do have ideas, I put them through such a strenuous test because I'm going to have to spend a lot of time with it. So do I really like it? Do I really want to spend, this many hours on this kind of material or whatever? So, it's a tricky thing. But for that show, I don't think so. I mean, it was not it's always sort of amazing when you think what else could they do? Like even, I did the Blacklist and it was very hard to come up with Blacklist ideas. And, I haven't been there in several years and I'm like, I can't believe they're still going. I thought we were on fumes back then. So, I'm just not built that way.
Well, have you watched any of the revival episodes? Because they did 9 years and then they brought it back.
I didn't, and I at least would like to see Darren's episodes, but I haven't watched them. I don't typically watch something after I leave, unless a friend wrote it or something like that. But I did hear that the Darren's episodes were really good, and so I should take some time to do that.
Yeah, they're very good.
Absolutely.
Very insightful on the human condition. I mean, it's Darren, of course.
Yeah.
So
Oh God, yeah.
He is. Yeah. I'm telling you, you don't.
Yes. Know. See, and he's one of those people. Every idea is his last.
Oh really?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
He just would punish himself. So So I can honestly say those were my only ideas. And then the other ideas that I couldn't actually solve. So, but I'm sure had I stayed, I would have come up with something.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
Now, you've spoken a little bit about this. I've read some articles, and Renee asks, do you think that the X-Files would have benefited from more women in the writer's room?
Yeah, I have done a couple of interviews about that. Well, like I said, there wasn't a writer's room. So it really...
Or on the staff.
Or on the staff. Yes, but, the thing is, there had been women on the staff. I certainly wasn't the only one. I think there were... Well, the Mayhew sisters were a team. I think there were 4. So 5 of us and 1 being a team. And all of us lasted a year. 1 season. So, like I said, it was a tough place, maybe a little tougher for women. I believe, even in one of those interviews, it's at the end, yes, because it would be helpful to the final product because Scully's a woman and, it's a perspective that men don't have. And yet it's Chris's show and he should have who he feels most comfortable with. He certainly couldn't have a full staff because it was a limited number of episodes. So he brought back who he perceived to be the best writers of the episode and the best relationships he had. But yes, I do also agree with Jillian's interviews and comments of, being represented and that she was half the show and a female perspective certainly wouldn't hurt.
Absolutely, yeah. I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
I did read an article about how you had formed kind of a a writer's group with moms and, kind of like a play date. I would love to hear a little bit about that. Just being a writer and a mom, myself, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that was a New York Times article. Yeah. And my son was a baby, and I was doing the show Las Vegas when that happened. So, yeah, I had a journalist. Somebody introduced me to this journalist, Lori Gottlieb, and we became friends. Our sons were about the same age. She was also a single mom. Not everybody in the group was, but she wanted to do this article, and we sort of put together some like play dates and some hangouts. And there was certainly in the 90s, it certainly felt, and I don't know about now, maybe not so much now, but it certainly felt like it could be dangerous to your career to have a kid. Certainly alone, I felt like I might be trading some opportunities. Not all, but some, because I couldn't just like never be home because you have a kid. So, everything from, well, maybe I'll never have my own show because how can I do both, until my son is older. But I chose to get pregnant while I was on Las Vegas because I was very happy there and also a very male dominated kind of place. But those guys were so happy for me and opening doors and bringing me things and asking to see my sonograms. And it was just a place that I felt like was a safe haven for me to do it. But I also had been sort of waiting for a job like that. And at that was in the early 2000s, but there were plenty of jobs I wouldn't have even considered it, so
yeah.
It's a tricky. It felt like you were going to be quietly penalized, maybe not out in the open, but something. So I think that has probably changed. It seems like it's gotten better.
Yeah. That's good. I'm glad it's getting better because I think being a writer, you kind of feel like at least that's something that you can kind of do as a mom too, during nap times or whatever. You have to juggle both.
Right.
But it's a little bit easier than like a corporate job where you have to be at a place for a certain amount of time all the time, And I feel like maybe having the writer's rooms or whatever that you have, it seems like it's a little bit more open to.
Yeah, well, in a writer's room, you literally are in an office all day long.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a writer's room, and if it's production time, you need to be on set for your episode. So you have to either have a husband or have help to be able to pull those things off. But it gets tougher when your kids are in their school years, and if you have a partner who also works, it's just trickier. So. I don't know if there's any particular answer. It's hard, it's not easy to try to have it all. That's for sure.
Right. I was curious, do you still keep in touch with those moms? Are the kids still friends? It seems like it would be such a supportive environment.
Yeah, you would think so, but I think, all of those, I know some of them as writers and, occasionally exchanging an email here and there and stuff like that, where you run into them. But, when kids get older and also, we live all over the city. So, it becomes about school friends and all of that. And then, of course, when they're older, they're picking their friends and not necessarily, I want them to be friends with somebody whose mom I like or whose dad I like. And then that friendship blows up and I'm like, come on, you ruined it for me, Exactly. So it's hard to maintain that kind of thing with babies and moms who live all over the place and they're working and, it's harder. But yeah, we did have a few gatherings, I think, and some meetings at a park, every like once a month or something. But then when they get bigger, they got their own opinions.
Yeah.
So.
But still, it seems like it would have been really nice to just have people that you could identify with, you know?
Yeah.
Just be like, man, this is how it is. It's so hard being a mom. Sometimes you just get into it. You just feel like you're so alone. But, you know, and then having writer friends who are in the same industry, it seems like it would have been
but I think also just knowing they're out there is like, you know, you can assume that they're experiencing some of what you're experiencing, and and just knowing you're not the only one, that can be enough.
Absolutely.
But I did have one job, I won't say which one it was, but I did hear from somebody who would have the knowledge that when it was being discussed about hiring me, that it came up that I was a single mom, and they were like, "Oh, well, she won't be that dedicated, so maybe we'll make her a consulting producer, and we can not pay top dollar." So that was interesting. I didn't do anything about it because, you know, what are you going to do? I've already been there and gone. But like, you know, that attitude I think still is there. Like, you know, she's not going to live and die for the show because she's got a kid, and it's like, and by the way, these people were dads, and it's like they got kids, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
But they've got, you know, the mom to take care of stuff for us,
right.
So they don't have to worry about that.
Right.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, that's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you hate to hear it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully it'll get better. We just have to keep working.
Yeah.
I think
so.
And I think the more people like you speak out, Gillian Anderson, the more this happens, the less people, writers' rooms, jobs in general, are going to be able to get away with it. And I think it's going to be baby steps, but
yeah,
it'll take a while.
Think,
but
you know,
we'll get there.
Right. I mean, right now we're in this whirlwind of change, and you know, with the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, and you know, it's a time where people are going out of their way to not just hire, you know, Ivy League white guys.
Yes.
Not that I wouldn't hire an Ivy League white guy. I know plenty that I love.
Of course.
But you know what I mean? It's like,
but not exclusively.
Yeah. It's harder to get away with having an all male staff now. Mm-hmm. It has changed so much since I started, and you know, and it's still changing.
And I can only imagine with, you know, streaming and everything, that upended things, and it just seems like everything is up in the air now, you know?
Yeah. Well, there are some virtual writers' rooms. I don't know really how many, and I don't know what that's like. And I also wonder if that will stick, you know? Like, if there will continue to be virtual rooms, or some people being virtual. That'll be interesting because, you know, like, for instance, you pretty much have to be in LA because you're going to be in a writer's room. So, you know, only feature writers get to live, you know, in exotic places or where, you know, or in the mountains or whatever. You know, they turn their novel in, or they turn their script in, and they come to LA, you know, maybe twice a year. But, you know, TV writers, you know, which is the majority of Hollywood writers, I think, you know, you got to be here. So it'll be interesting to see what shifts and changes, what is going to stay from the pandemic, and if that will free people to be in other places, sort of broaden the spectrum.
That would be great because, you know, I mean, I'm in Atlanta and I still feel like I can't, you know, I would love to write for television, but I'm like, well, I have to write novels because I don't want to live in LA. I don't want to live out there. So, you know, I think it would be great if there were a wider range of places and locations that writers could be instead of just having to relocate, you know?
Well, yeah. My husband works in television. He is a writer-producer for like commercials, basically. And he hasn't been to the office. So he once the pandemic hit, he would go once a week on Friday, but now they're doing everything. He gets the live stream at home. Yeah. He writes his copy, sends it in. He does everything virtually.
Right.
He can Zoom with all of his colleagues. And then when he needs voiceover artists or whatever, he gets on a Zoom call with them and they record it. And that's it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And everything is done virtually.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see, because I think that a lot of businesses will be able to justify not having these big, expensive, office buildings that they have to be in.
Like Viacom got rid of their building in Times Square.
Oh, they did.
They just, they told everybody, don't come back. We're still in the building.
Right. Right. Wow.
So,
And I wonder if that'll be a help for the mothers who maybe do want to stay home. And I'm not saying that the fathers don't want to stay home, but if you can have an in-home nanny during the day while you're working, you have lunch with the baby, that would seem very helpful.
Yeah.
And, you can't take the kids out of school to move to Los Angeles because you want a writing job, but
Right.
that's something,
Right.
So.
Well, they're doing online school too. My son's, they're in virtual. He's doing virtual one-on-one teaching. So not with a big classroom. So it's almost the same as being there, frankly. We shall see what happens.
Well, good luck with everything.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
I appreciate it.
I guess I just have one more question.
Okay.
How does it feel that something like 25 years later, people are still talking about the work that you did on the X-Files, that you're here doing an interview about Revelations and Quagmire, and people absolutely love it?
It is, I was thinking about it as time was clicking towards us getting on our Zoom. I certainly recognize that that's a special situation and a rare one. There aren't many shows that this many years later that would still be having conversations so specifically about the material. So I think it's awesome and that it really holds up. I'm trying to get my 15-year-old to watch it, but they're so spoiled by how like just how TV shows look now, just with the technology. Mm-hmm. I did ask him to watch Quagmire, and he was like 11, and I left the room and I came back and he was watching something else, and I said, "What happened?" And he goes, "It was so slow." I mean, he literally watched like 2 minutes and nothing happened. So,
oh my goodness.
But that
first part is the most riveting. Oh my gosh.
This generation. Well, I guess they were just in the car driving, talking about the dog. And
that part.
It's so good.
I guess if you're an 11-year-old boy, though, that's not.
What's bigger than the hill?
He's probably watching it as an 11-year-old girl.
Yeah.
I know. It's this generation, though. But no, but I think it's amazing that it's has this kind of life for so long. It's amazing, and makes me proud to have been part of it, for sure.
It has resonance, and we thank you for everything.
Oh, you're welcome.
Absolutely.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Do you have any social media where people can find you in case they want to follow your work, your thoughts?
I don't really. I mean,
okay.
I just have my silly Facebook with like just friends that I know personally, and I do have a Twitter account, and I do check it sometimes. It's at Texas Newton.
Okay.
At Texas Newton. So I do have that Twitter, and I do check it sometimes, and I have had some Twitter back and forth with Frank Spotnitz and Jeff Laming, and there's some if you look at that thread on there, you can see Jeff Laming was a cartoonist who worked on the show season that I was on, and he drew on the walls. He drew these he drew these pictures of like cartoon pictures of the staff and of all the monsters and all the episodes in like a montage on a wall, and so some of that is there. Which is very cool. Awesome. Is very cool to see. Yeah.
Sarah, where can we find you?
You can find me at Sarah L. Blair on Twitter, and I'm at author.sarah.blair on Instagram. And you can find me hosting our regular season. We just wrapped up season 6 of the X Cast. So we're going to be digging into season 7 pretty soon. I'm very excited about it. So it's going to be fun.
And you can find me on Twitter at AnnieXFlowers, and check out my vocals on Audio Fanfic Podcast. I'm sometimes on Facebook in the basement, but don't count on it. I lurk. Well, that's pretty much it. So thanks for joining us for another episode. And remember, we are part of the We Made This podcast network, and the X-Files is not all we're discussing. So we'll give you a taste of what you might have missed on the network in a moment. Until then, remember as always, trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This. The giddy carousel of pop.
There's a little bit with fan clubs, and there's you're in good company there, Paul. There's Japan, The Beats, Spandau Ballet again, and the Fall Foundation, 429B, Bury New Road, Salford 7, Lancashire.
So if people had written to this, what would they have got in return? Can you remember?
Well, it's interesting you could say that, because we did write back. We basically, every now and again, Mark would give us a few letters and say, write back to them. And one of the people who got a reply and who still got the letter, Stuart Lee, and Bob Stanley, I sent him a letter, apparently, so I'm led to believe later on. I replied to his letter and sent him a letter and a poster, and he's still got the poster. He's lost the letter, though. So, I mean, I don't know how much we did reply, but there was no fan club then. I think the Fall had a fan club later on. The Fall Foundation was just, write us a letter and we might send you one back. I think that's as far as it went.
Back to the decade.
However, just last week, Gore Verbinski announced he's going to return to animation with 2 films in the next 3 years that are a similar style.
Huh.
So we'll have to see how that goes.
Why not Ringo? What's wrong? What's going on with Johnny Depp these days? Everything cool?
Yeah, is he okay? I mean, there's nothing wrong with him, right?
Life's milestones.
So tell me your favourite story about your childhood.
As I mentioned earlier, I've always been kind of immersed in books. My mother was the president of the local library friends group. So every spring and fall, they would have a huge book sale at the local library. And so starting from when I was 8 years old, I was running up and down the basement stairs of the library, hauling books up to the main floor for the book sale. And I always loved it because they would always let me have whatever I wanted, whatever book I wanted. So, by the time I'd leave, I had 3 or 4 boxes worth of books to bring home. My room was full of bookshelves, and I had a literal library in my childhood bedroom.
Is that something that you've continued as you've got older?
Oh yeah, I have thousands of books.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network. The X-Cast and X-Files podcast was created by Tony Black and is produced and hosted by Carl Sweeney, Sarah Blair and Kurt North.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the X-Cast, and in our group, X-Files Basement, the X-Cast podcast fan group, and on Instagram at the X-Cast pod.
Don't forget, you can support the show by becoming a member on Patreon. Our patrons get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes chats with our hosts and a thriving community of X-Files, and other premium interviews and specials. To find out more and subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/thexcast. That's patreon.com/thexcast.
We are also part of the We Made This podcast network, full of popular culture shows, including our Millennium series, The Time Is Now. You can find all of our shows at our website, wemadethispod.com, or via Twitter at wemadethispod.
Thanks for listening and keep watching the skies.